You think bartending is all about mixing drinks and small talk. In northern Nevada, it's a different game. Here behind the bar, we follow rules that will chill you to the bone. Curious yet? I should have known better. Should have trusted that gut feeling, that primal instinct screaming at me to turn around and walk away, but desperation has a way of drowning out common sense, doesn't it? When you're down to your last bucks, a half-empty pack of cigarettes and more unpaid bills, then you can count the word choice becomes a joke, a punchline to the cosmic joke that your life has become. That's how I found myself standing in front of Forever Bar on a chilly October night, the wind whispering through the empty streets like a warning. I was too stubborn to heed the neon sign above the door, flickered weakly, half the letters burnt out, leaving only FORR glowing an angry red against the inky black sky. It pulsed like a wound, each flash sending shadows dancing across the cracked pavement. I stood there, guitar case slung over my shoulder, the last remnant of a dream, long faded, staring at a crooked night bartender needed ASAP sign taped to the grimy window. The paper was yellowed and curling at the edges as if it had been there for years, but I could have sworn it wasn't there yesterday when I'd walked past this same spot, head down, shoulders hunched against the world. The longer I stared at that sign, the more the air around me seemed to thicken. It pressed against my skin, heavy with the promise of something I couldn't name but felt in my bones. It was like standing on the edge of a cliff, knowing that one more step would send you plummeting into the unknown. I took a deep breath, trying to steady my nerves. The cool night air filled my lungs, carrying with it the faint scent of stale beer, and something else, something metallic and sweet that made my stomach turn. I shook my head, chalking it up to nerves and an empty stomach with a final glance at the help wanted sign. I pushed open the door and stepped into Forever Bar. The smell hit me first, a wall of sensory overload that nearly made me stagger back. Whiskey-soaked wood, cheap perfume and cigarette smoke so thick you could almost chew it. It clung to everything. The peeling wallpaper, the scuffed floor, the very air itself. This wasn't just the smell of a bar, it was the smell of time itself, stagnant and sour as my eyes adjusted to the dim light I took in my surroundings. The bar was larger than it looked from outside, stretching back into shadows that seemed to swallow the far wall. Booths lined one wall, their red vinyl seats cracked and faded. A jukebox stood silent in one corner, its glass front reflecting the weak light from overhead fixtures. The few patrons scattered around barely looked up as I entered. They sat hunched over their drinks, faces hidden in shadow, looking more like part of the day than living, breathing people. A man in a rumpled suit sat at the bar, his tie loose around his neck, staring into his glass as if it held the secrets of the universe in a corner. Booth, a woman in a faded red dress, traced patterns in spilled liquor on the tabletop, her eyes unfocused and distant. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the occasional clink of glass on wood and the soft hum of an ancient ceiling fan that seemed to be moving the smoke more than the air. Each slow rotation sent shadows spinning across the room, creating the unsettling illusion that the walls themselves were breathing. I made my way to the bar, each step feeling heavier than the last. The floorboards creaked beneath my feet, the sound unnaturally loud in the stillness of the room. I could feel eyes on me, though when I glanced around no one seemed to be looking in my direction. The bartender, an old man who looked like he'd been carved from weathered oak, didn't even glance up as I approached. He was polishing a glass with a rag that looked dirtier than the floor, his movement slow and mechanical. His skin was pale, almost translucent in the dim light, mapped with a web of blue veins. I cleared my throat, hating how the sound seemed to echo in the quiet bar. "You still looking for a bartender?" I asked, my voice cracking on the last word. He grunted, a sound that seemed to come from somewhere deep in his chest. "You got any experience?" I swallowed hard, my mouth suddenly dry. "Not really, but I'm a fast learner." He set the glass down with a soft thunk and finally looked at me. His eyes were pale, almost colorless, and seemed to see right through me. I fought the urge to step back as he studied me, feeling like a bug under a microscope. There was something in his gaze, a weight, a knowing that made my skin crawl after what felt like an eternity. He shrugged. The movement was stiff, as if his joints hadn't moved in years. "Pays an hour cash." My heart leapt, a spark of hope flaring in my chest. That kind of money could buy me some time, maybe even get me back on my feet. It was more than I dared to hope for. "I'll do it," I said, trying not to sound too eager. The old man nodded towards a door behind the bar. It was barely visible in the gloom, its edges blurring into the shadows, as if it was trying to hide before you start. You got to read the rules. They're pinned to the wall in there. I nodded, relief washing over me. Rules I could handle. Rules meant structure, safety, a framework to cling to, in this strange, unsettling place. But then the old man spoke again, his voice suddenly sharp. Stick to the rules. Kevin, don't ask questions, just do what they say. I blinked, surprise cutting through my relief. How did you know my... He cut me off with a look, his pale eyes boring into mine. In that moment I could have sworn I saw something move behind them. A flicker of shadow gone so quickly, I wasn't sure if I'd imagined it. The rules, he repeated each word slow and deliberate. Follow them with that. He turned away, effectively dismissing me. I stood there for a moment, uncertainty gnawing at my gut. How did he know my name? I hadn't told him, hadn't shown him any ID. The unease that had been simmering since I'd entered the bar threatened to boil over. But the thought of that money, of finally having a chance, pushed me forward. I needed this job. Needed it more than I needed answers. I slipped behind the bar, the wood smooth and cool under my hands, and made my way to the door. The handle was ice cold against my palm, sending a shiver up my arm for a moment. I could have sworn I felt it pulse like gripping a living thing. I shook my head, dispelling the thought. Just nerves, I told myself, just nerves, and an overactive imagination. I pushed open the door and stepped into the back room. The space beyond was tiny, more of a closet than a room. The air was thick and stale, heavy with the scent of mildew and something else, something metallic and vaguely sweet that made my stomach turn. It was the same scent I'd caught a whiff of outside, but stronger now, cloying and inescapable. Every inch of wall space was covered in photographs, creating a dizzying collage of faces and moments. Some were faded and yellow with age, their subjects dressed in clothes from decades past. Others looked newer, the colors still vibrant, but all of them shared a strange quality. A blur around the edges, as if the people in them had been moving when the picture was taken. My eyes were drawn to the center, where a single photo stood out from the rest. It was larger than the others, its frame ornate and tarnished. The image showed a four-piece band, mid-performance guitarist, drummer, bassist, and singer. They were lost in the music, faces contorted with passion, sweat glistening on their skin. Something about the image made my skin crawl, though I couldn't say why. Maybe it was the intensity in their eyes, a fervor that seemed almost manic, or maybe it was the way the background behind them seemed to shift and swirl, as if the photo was capturing more than just a moment in time. With shaking hands, I reached out to touch the frame. The metal was warm uncomfortably, so as if the photo had been sitting in direct sunlight despite the dimness of the room. As my fingers made contact, I could have sworn I heard a faint whisper of music, a melody so haunting it made my chest ache. I pulled my hand back as if burned, my heart pounding. This was insane. I was letting my imagination run wild, seeing and hearing things that weren't there. I just needed to read the rules and get to work. Everything would make sense once I started my shift. I turned the photo over, half expecting, I don't know what, a portal to another world, maybe a glimpse into some eldritch horror, but it was just the back of a photo frame, ordinary, mundane, except for the rules. They were written on the back in cramped, messy handwriting. The ink was faded in places, as if someone had run their fingers over the words countless times. I leaned in closer, squinting in the dim light to make out the text. Rule 1, lock the doors at exactly midnight, no exceptions. Rule 2, never serve anyone a drink after AM. If they ask, say the bar is closed. Rule 3, if the jukebox starts playing on its own, don't stop it. Let the song finish. Rule 4, if someone asks what day it is, always say it's Friday. Doesn't matter if it isn't. Rule after AM, don't look at the mirror behind the bar, even if it whispers your name. Rule 6, if a drink is left untouched, take it to the back room right away. Don't let it sit. Rule S, before your shift ends, play something on the guitar. I read the list twice, then a third time, trying to commit it to memory. Each rule sent a fresh chill down my spine, raising goosebumps on my arms. They were odd, specific in a way that made no sense. Why would the jukebox play on its own? Why would the mirror whisper my name? But I pushed the feeling aside. It was probably just some weird hazing ritual. I told myself a way to mess with the new guy. Every workplace had its quirks, right? This was just forever. Bar's way of initiating new employees. As I turned to leave, my eyes fell on the band photo again for a split second, so brief I thought I must have imagined it. The faces in the image seemed to shift, their expressions morphed from ecstasy to terror, mouths open in silent screams. I blinked and it was gone. Just 4 musicians caught in a moment of musical rapture. Just nerves, I told myself again. Just nerves and a tricky light. I stepped back into the bar, the sounds and smells washing over me like a wave. The old bartender was gone, leaving me alone with the handful of patrons. They all turned to look at me as I took my place behind the bar, their eyes glassy and unfocused. "All right," I muttered to myself, rolling up my sleeves. "Let's do this." The next few hours passed in a blur of pouring drinks and making small talk. I fell into a rhythm, the familiar motions of mixing drinks providing a comforting sense of normalcy, but there was an undercurrent of wrongness that I couldn't shake. The customers were odd. They spoke in slow, deliberate sentences, as if they were trying to remember the words as they went. A man at the end of the bar ordered a scotch, then stared at the glass for a full minute before taking a sip. When he did, his eyes widened in surprise, as if he'd forgotten what alcohol tasted. Like a woman in a fat blue dress kept ordering gin and tonics, but every time I served her, she'd push it away untouched and order another. I remembered the rule about untouched drinks, but each time I tried to take it to the back room, she'd grab my wrist with surprising strength and shake her head. Her skin was ice cold and her grip left marks that lingered long after she let go. As the night wore on, I found myself glancing more and more frequently at the clock. Time seemed to move strangely here. Sometimes I'd look away for what felt like seconds, only to find that half an hour had passed. Other times the minutes crawled by with agonizing slowness. As midnight approached, a nervous energy began to build in my chest. I kept watching the clock, my heart rate increasing with each tick of the second hand. As I made my way to the front door, key in hand, my palms were sweaty, making the metal slip in my grip. The clock struck. I turned the lock. The click seemed unnaturally loud in the quiet bar, and I could have sworn I felt something settle over the room like a blanket being draped over a birdcage. The air grew thicker, heavier, pressing against my skin. When I turned back, the patrons were all staring at me. Their eyes seemed sharper now, more focused, more hungry. I swallowed hard and made my way back to the bar, feeling their gazes follow me every step of the way. The floorboards creaked beneath my feet, each sound amplified in the stillness. The night crawled on each minute, stretching into what felt like hours. The air grew thicker, heavier, until it felt like I was breathing syrup. The smoke from cigarettes hung motionless in the air, defying the lazy spin of the ceiling fan. Conversations became muted words slurring together into an incomprehensible murmur that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. At a.m., the jukebox crackled to life. The sound made me jump, my heart leaping into my throat. I remembered the rule: if the jukebox starts playing on its own, don't stop it, let the song finish. My hands shook as I poured a drink, spilling a few drops on the bar. The liquid seemed to sizzle where it landed, leaving faint scorch marks on the wood. The melody that filled the air was unlike anything I'd ever heard before. It was jazz, I think, but wrong. The notes seemed to bend and twist in impossible ways, creating harmonies that shouldn't exist. It made my teeth ache and my vision blur. Colors seemed to leak from the edges of things, swirling in the air like oil on water. But the patrons, they came alive. Their movements became fluid, almost graceful. They swayed to the music, eyes closed, expressions rapturous. Some of them mouthed along to lyrics. I couldn't hear their lips forming words. In a language I didn't recognize, the woman in the blue dress stood up, her movements jerky like a marionette with tangled strings, and began to dance. Her feet didn't quite touch the ground. I stood, frozen behind the bar, unable to look away. The song seemed to go on forever, building to a crescendo that never quite came, just when I thought I couldn't take it anymore. When the pressure in my head threatened to split my skull. It ended. The silence that followed was deafening. The patrons settled back into their seats, the energy draining out of them like air from a punctured balloon. They returned to their drinks as if nothing had happened, but there was a satisfaction in their movements now, like they'd been fed. I shook my head, trying to clear the lingering echoes of that impossible song from my mind. This was insane. I was letting my imagination run wild, seeing things that weren't there. I just needed to focus on getting through the night. But as a.m. approached, a new kind of dread began to build in my gut after a.m. Don't look at the mirror behind the bar, even if it whispers your name. I tried to keep my eyes down, focused on wiping glasses and arranging bottles. but I could feel the mirror behind me, a presence as real and solid as any person. The hair on the back of my neck stood on end, and I could have sworn I felt a cold breath on my skin. "Kevin." The whisper was so soft I almost missed it. I froze, my hands gripping the edge of the bar so tightly my knuckles turned white. The glass I'd been polishing slipped from my fingers, shattering on the floor. The sound was muffled, as if coming from underwater. "Kevin," louder this time, unmistakable, my name spoken in a voice that was mine, but not. It was my voice, but hollow, empty, wrong. It echoed in my head, bouncing off the inside of my skull until it was all I could hear, against every instinct, screaming at me not to. I turned and looked at the mirror for a moment. Everything seemed normal. I saw myself, pale and wide-eyed, reflected in the grimy glass, the bar stretched out behind me, dark and indistinct. But then the reflection changed. The me in the mirror smiled, a wide, unnatural grin that split its face. Its eyes were black, bottomless pits that seemed to draw me in. It raised a hand, pressing it against the glass from the other side. I could hear the squeak of skin on glass, could see the way its fingertips whitened with pressure. I stumbled back, my hip hitting the bar, hard enough to bruise. The impact sent a shock through my body, snapping me out of the trance-like state I'd fallen into. When I looked again, the mirror was normal, just my own terrified face staring back at me. The bar reflected behind me exactly as it should be. A laugh from one of the patrons snapped me back to reality. I turned to see a woman approaching the bar, her heels clicking on the wooden floor with a rhythm that seemed just slightly off. She was beautiful in a way that didn't quite seem real, like a memory of beauty rather than the thing itself. Her red dress clung to her frame, the color so vivid it hurt to look at, as if it was reflecting light that wasn't there. "What day is it?" she asked, her voice lilting and musical. Her lips curved into a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Those eyes, they were old, ancient. They didn't belong in that young, perfect face. I remembered the rule. "It's Friday," I said, proud of how steady my voice sounded. My hands were shaking, but I clenched them into fists, hiding them beneath the bar. Her smile widened too wide, showing too many teeth, and she nodded. "Good bow, boy," she purred before gliding back to her seat. I watched her go, unable to shake the feeling that her movements were too smooth, too fluid, as if she wasn't quite bound by the same laws of physics as the rest of us at AM. She returned to the bar and ordered a whiskey. I poured it with shaking hands and slid it across to her. She didn't touch it, just sat there staring at the amber liquid with an intensity that made my skin crawl. The ice cubes and the glass clinked together, the sound unnaturally loud in the quiet bar. "If a drink is left untouched, take it to the back room right away. Don't let it sit." I remembered the rule with a jolt of fear. I picked up the glass, careful not to spill a drop, and made my way to the back room. Each step felt like I was walking through molasses, the air thick and resistant. The woman's eyes followed me, burning into my back. I could feel the weight of her gaze even after I'd pushed through the door. The back room was different now. The photographs on the walls seemed to pulse with a faint, sickly light. Faces in the images turned to watch me as I passed, their eyes following my movement. I tried to tell myself it was a trick of the light, an illusion caused by stress and lack of sleep, but deep down I knew better. I set the drink down on a small table, my eyes drawn to the central photo, the one of the band. They were gone. In their place stood the customers, the same ones sitting in the bar right now. They stared out of the image with dead eyes, their mouths open in silent screams. The woman in the red dress was front and center, her smile wide and terrible. I stumbled out of the room, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might burst from my chest. This wasn't happening. It couldn't be happening. I was tired. That was all. My mind was playing tricks on me. I leaned against the wall, trying to catch my breath, trying to make sense of what I'd seen. But as I returned to the bar, I knew deep in my bones, I knew that something was terribly, irreversibly wrong. The woman in the red dress was still there, her untouched whiskey now back in front of her. I blinked, confused. I just left that drink in the back room. How could it be here? She smiled at me, and for a moment I saw something else behind her face, something ancient and hungry. "Tell me, Kevin," she said, her voice a silky purr. "Do you believe in eternity?" I opened my mouth to respond, but no words came out. My throat felt dry, constricted. The air around us seemed to thicken, the sounds of the bar fading away until all I could hear was the pounding of my own heart. She leaned in closer, her perfume overwhelming a cloying sweetness that reminded me of decaying FL hours. "You will," she whispered. Her breath sea against my ear as she pulled back her face, shifted for just a second. I saw something else, a face made of shadows and teeth, eyes like burning coals. Then she was beautiful again, smiling that too wide smile, but now I could see the wrongness in her features, the way they didn't quite fit together properly. I stumbled backwards, nearly falling. The other patrons were watching now, their eyes gleaming in the dim light. They looked expectant, hungry. The man in the rumpled suit licked his lips, his tongue unnaturally long, and pointed the woman in the blue dress, tilted her head at an impossible angle, her neck stretching like putty. "What is this place?" I managed to croak out, my voice barely more than a whisper. "Ah." The woman in red laughed, a sound like breaking glass. It echoed through the bar, multiplying until it seemed to come from everywhere at once. "Oh, Kevin, you signed up for the job. Didn't you read the contract? What contract? I hadn't signed anything, but even as I thought it, a memory surfaced, hazy and dreamlike. The old bartender holding out a piece of paper, me signing without reading, too desperate for the job to care about the details. The pen had been heavy in my hand, and the ink had been red, too red. What did I sign? I whispered, fear clawing at my insides. I already knew the answer, but some part of me needed to hear it. "Needed to make it real, your soul, darling," she said as casually as if she were discussing the weather, just like all the others. As if on cue, the jukebox crackled to life again. But this time, the music was different. It was a cacophony of screams and pleas, punctuated by the sound of breaking glass and splintering wood. I recognized one of the voices. It was mine, begging for help, my future self trapped in this nightmare for eternity. The patrons began to change. Their skin grew pale and translucent, their features blurring and shifting. Some grew extra limbs, while others seemed to melt into puddles of shadow. The man in the suit's face split open, revealing rows upon rows of needle-sharp teeth. The woman in the blue dress elongated, her body twisting into impossible shapes. I tried to run, but my feet wouldn't move. I was rooted to the spot, forced to watch, as the bar transformed around me. The walls bled dark liquid, oozing from between the photographs. The ceiling stretched upwards, becoming an endless void filled with writhing shapes. Hands reached out from the shadows, grasping and clawing at the air, and still that terrible music played on. "Welcome home, Kevin." The woman in red said, her voice now a chorus of 1,000 tormented souls. "Your shift is just beginning." As the horror of my situation truly sank in, I felt something snap inside me, a dam breaking, releasing a flood of memories that weren't mine. Countless nights in this bar, serving drinks to the damned, the faces of 1,000 bartenders before me, all trapped in this eternal nightmare. I saw the truth of Forever Bar. It wasn't just a place, it was a living, breathing entity, a trap for lost souls feeding on their despair and desperation, and now I was a part of it. As dawn broke over the city, Forever Bar stood silent and dark. But inside, the music played on, and behind the bar a new face stared out from a freshly hung photograph, eyes wide with the terror of understanding. "My name is Kevin, and I work the night shift at Forever Bar. The shift never ends, and neither does if you're ready to dive into the bizarre world of bartending secrets. Hit that subscribe button and stick around, because the strangest rule might be the one that gets you next."